Well, hello, everyone. We're just waiting one more minute for people to join. Thank you all for joining today's executive panel on employee engagement and recognition. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome, everybody. Today, we are excited. We have a full packed house. We have three expert panelists today to talk about some hot topics as we move into 2024, specifically around caring inclusion, engagement, and recognition with employees. So I'm going to give you the ground rules. Number one, this is designed to be a discussion. We have 4 or 5 breaks, and the panelists are going to talk about their experiences in their own companies and also what they're seeing with other companies. We also encourage you to use the Q&A function. We do have some folks behind the scenes that are getting those questions. We will line those up. We will ask the panelists as we go, and we will have time at the end. The disclaimer is, you may or may not hear exactly what you want to hear with tips and tricks for your size organization, your geography. We have an opportunity when this ends. We're going to summarize some of the key points from today. We'll send it out. You can set up a quick meeting with one of our consultants, not salespeople, one of our consultants to talk through the trends. So that's number one. Number two, I want to just get through introductions and then we'll get right into it. So if we start today, we're very excited to have 3 individuals. I'm going to start with Sharell Thomas. She is an HR expert. This is multiple decades of consulting, coaching, business development, in particular, multiple industries. And in those industries, she's really served as an expert for the senior teams regarding career development, compensation, benefits, and engagement. So we're very excited to have her. In addition to Lisa and Keith, would encourage you to follow her and her 13,000 followers on LinkedIn for all things HR. In addition, we have Keith Puckett. Keith is a former investment banker, a long time on Wall Street, and then moved into the entrepreneurial world, where he spent time building up companies like Pop Bookings that became Shift Gigs. So really on the advent of gig economy work. And since that operation, Keith is now the co-founder CEO of a very fast-growing tech company called Ubiety Technologies. They're in the digital identification and security space, as well as advising a lot of companies. And then we have Lisa Schrader, who has a long career in public service, which includes not only working in various federal roles, but in the city of Chicago, where she was not only the chief operating officer, 2 different administrations, but then the chief of staff. And what that means is roughly 80,000 employees, $18 billion budget. Then moving on to private with senior roles at both Uber as well as Luminary, where she currently serves as senior advisor, former COO. So we have a wide variety of expertise here today and excited to dig in. We're going to start today with just 3 quick summary slides on the trends. So what have we seen in 2023? What's moving as we move into 2024? So we'll start there. And Eric, you can tee us up. Great. If we can go to the second slide, please. And then we're going to go into the third slide. So what is the trend? So many of you have pieces of this, but I'm just going to summarize it. And this is really the stats from all the big consulting firms, right? We know today, post-COVID, productivity has remained relatively high, but people are still concerned about the workplace. And what do we see? 65% of employees are not engaged at work. Up to a third of new hires are quitting within 90 days. And we've got 46% of employees that are silent quitting. What does that mean? People are looking around their shoulder. They're either concerned about their present job or they don't have the connection with their present job. They're looking for that next opportunity. And we also know that disengagement, by whatever definition you want to provide, is causing a lot of pain. It is getting harder and harder to recruit people. Despite the recession, it's a very tough job market. And just the lack of productivity in today's flexible work arenas is causing less productivity, more dollars. And if we hit the next slide. So what's going on? So if we were all live together, everyone would raise their hand. Hey, are you doing something for your employees? Absolutely, right? Everyone will say, all the business executives, yes, we are trying to recognize our employees more. We're trying to engage them more. But if you do the same poll to actual frontline employees, it's a different story. 40% feel like they haven't really adequately been recognized, and up to 68% say, hey, they've received no recognition over the past year. So there is a disconnect between, hey, traditionally, what did we do for recognition and engagement, and what people are wanting and feeling today. Next slide. Okay, so what do we face as we hit 2024? There is competing factors. Top of CHRO lists, top of executive lists are employees. We know there is a return on investment in employee engagement. There on the slide, on the right-hand side. We know all of the benefits around employee engagement. And yet, we have some macro forces in play today. We've got recession. We just saw Tyson Foods today. There are layoffs. There are hiring freezes. There are reduced budgets. And there are competing factors for how we are going to accomplish some of these people factors. So we're going to go ahead and pause. We'll pause the slideshow here. We want to hear from our factors, or from our panelists. We're going to do a little round robin. So Keith, we're going to start with you on this one. What are you seeing as CEO with your own company or other companies in terms of, hey, what's the backdrop going into 2024 with some of these trends?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. First of all, I just want to say Sharell and Lisa are highly qualified to share their experience here, so I'll do my best to keep up. My experience throughout my career has been a little different, so I just want to give a little background. Like, you introduced me spending a lot of time on Wall Street. That was true. Like, my view of work and relationships with employees at work when I was on Wall Street was very different. It was very transaction oriented. It was very like, show me an outcome and that gets rewarded. As a serial entrepreneur, however, I'm inspired by investing in people. And if I, every opportunity that I have to build a culture that folks want to be a part of, things that affect the macro don't always affect us. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but like, I really seek out folks who are inspired by a mission, that are aligned directly with the outcomes of the business. And so like, for us, we really try to empower folks to unlock the best value they can for their own development. And that always is valuable or accretive to us as an organization. I did just want to say, like, when you put someone's future in their own hands and allow them to see what's possible for themselves, they will always outperform your own expectations to them. And so like, we really try to cultivate this culture of engagement by doing, right? Like, when we interview people, and as the CEO of my company, I do interviews with a lot of folks to make sure it's a cultural fit. And in none of those interviews do I describe all the perks that people will get or all of the exciting things that could develop or be unlocked for them. I describe the mission and candidly how hard the work is and we attract people that fit the idea of what we're trying to accomplish. And I always just say, like, I get the benefit of working for them. I believe in this like servant leadership mentality. If I can invest in them and help them be the best, like, they always make the business more successful. So, some of the trends do tend to be a bit scary when you focus on them at the macro. But if you focus on people individually and all the hiring managers and people managers inside your organization, you can kind of combat those trends by just good old fashioned investing in people with your time.
That's great. All right, Sharell.
So I'll piggyback on that, Keith, because it looks like we were going in the same direction as I was thinking through that question. I will say, though, I do not have the fortunate experience as you did to have just been able to focus on the culture for my entire career. And so as Matt shared before, I've been in a few different industries. Primarily, I think the difference between what I've experienced in kind of the profit world and now working for a nonprofit as a total rewards director is exactly what you've touched on, Keith. It's all about kind of that purpose-driven work. And so I joined the YMCA right at the cusp of COVID. And so to your point, I think for us, everything was unknown, but not this organization. So I think about the resiliency, the work, and the fact that all of the people that we hire do find purpose in the work that we do. And so it makes my job easier because I'm not selling on the perks and the benefits, et cetera, because just as Keith mentioned, no one really cares about that. They are really concerned about what we do in the community and how can they be a part of that. And so I do feel like that is the new trend. I think a lot of organizations are now realizing that it is about the culture, it is about the employee experience. And so now let's try to focus on that. So the good thing is that was already in place at my current organization. And so we are just capitalizing on that. And so we're just thinking of what are new ways now that we're in this remote hybrid environment. What does that look like in terms of engagement? And for us, it is still that intentional tie back to the mission. And so we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just making sure that everything we do when we think of collaboration in this remote world, it is still making that employee kind of see how is it what I do every day? How is that impacting the mission of this organization? And once that is clear and we're constantly communicating that, our employees are being engaged, even though we do have this hybrid work environment.
Okay. Lisa?
Well, I'm going to be on the same lane as Keith and Sharell. My career started in doing political campaigns, issue campaigns, candidate campaigns, and then did nearly 15 years of government service at the city of Chicago. That work was inevitably purpose-driven, not unlike what Sharell is doing. Everybody knew why they were there, particularly on a political campaign. And you're willing to, work 7 days a week, 14-hour days. It's an insane life, but people were committed to the cause. But even in government, public service is a calling. People, care about serving the residents of the city of Chicago. And so the mission, drove the work and the culture in a lot of ways. Certainly leaders and managers need to know how to manage people. But that wasn't ever a challenge, the mission part of it. As I've moved into the private sector, I have found challenges in how to create that same sort of team environment that you're working towards a goal. The goal may be, in government, the goal may be providing, a better public education for kids and making sure that your Streets and Sand picks up your trash every week on Thursday, or developing a new park. And those are really great things. Moving into the private sector, it's about growing the business. And so how do you create that sort of that team, we're in this together feeling in the private sector? And I think it is more challenging. We at Luminary, we want to sell subscriptions. We think our content is fabulous, but it's a different mission and product that we're selling. And so I think part of creating, the right culture begins with something Keith said. And I am gonna plug a friend's book, a friend who Matt knows, for a second, but this is not something, but it's a book called Right Fit, Wrong Fit. It's a friend of ours, Dr. Andre Martin wrote it. And part of what he talks about is finding the right people when you hire them. So like to your point, Keith, it's here's what the work is, here's what the mission is, making sure that when you hire those employees, they're on board with that mission. They want to be part of that team that's accomplishing that goal. And if you can get that right at the beginning, I think it makes all of this a lot easier. Employees, when they're looking at prospective companies, they should be thinking about the same thing. How do they work? What are they doing? Do I care about that? Because at the end of the day, you can, put bells and whistles on anything you want. You've got to care about the work and what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. And a ping pong table isn't going to change how you feel about your workspace and your colleagues. And so I think that's really important. The other thing that I just think I touched on it even in city government, but you can't underestimate the importance of having competent and people managers. And not everybody is designed to be a people manager. And I think some people have more natural instincts and gravitate towards it more. They have high EQ. They understand the substance of the work and understand how people are feeling in the moment. Some people need a little bit more training. Some things aren't instinctive to them. And so I think that part of ensuring you have a good culture in your company is ensuring that your people managers are properly trained in how to do that. And for me, it's always about feedback in the moment. If we could have done better, I'm going to tell you in the moment. And when there's a job well done, I will express great gratitude for that job, because even though it was your job, when you did it well, you deserve to be recognized for that. And managers need to understand those basic tenets of the job. And so I think that, part of what companies should be working on is, again, ensuring that they have the right people, the right fit for what the business mission is. And then ensuring that they have people managers that know how to manage people and that can bring together a team who's working together. And sometimes there'll be disagreement on how to get to the goal, but a good team can have those disagreements and work hard and be committed to getting there. I think that's the key to me.
Okay, lot of good stuff here. A lot of what we talked about, both on that hiring, the feedback, mission-driven. Many of the organizations we're dealing with don't have the three leaders that are with us today that are driving that, or maybe somewhere down the line where they don't have that executive servant leadership attitude. So I think the next couple slides we'll get into, how do we drive those specifics within our individual realm. So thanks all. Okay. So let's get into it. Engagement and culture. What's working? What's changing? If we get to the next slide. Okay. Very busy slide. This will be made available to everyone, so don't sweat it. Josh Burswin Company, excellent HR consultancy and research group, came up with a lot of different data analysis and research that went into this slide. And the punchline is, hey, what is most important to employees today? It is trust and transparency in their own organization, trust in that company. And then it's inclusion and caring. And that comes in a lot of forms. So I'm going to go right back to the panel. This time we're going to start with Sharell. We'll go to Lisa, then Keith. And I want to talk about, hey, if we get a little more granular, is there any things that you're doing on the caring inclusion side outside of maybe the recognition engagement side? And so we'll start with you, Sharell.
That is a very good question. And so I think for us, it's always been about inclusion. Just because of the layout and kind of how our organization is, we have a few different independent subsidiaries that kind of operate on their own. And so our goal is to really create this one experience. And so we're in the trenches of kind of doing that. So everything for us is in the lens of just being inclusive. I think for us, and this probably falls in line with everyone, it's all about when we think of from a recognition perspective, I just think it's exactly what Lisa shared. And it's really just being intentional around the consistency of it. So I think that that's different. Everyone is kind of doing it. We have some managers that are kind of doing it every, maybe team meeting, or they're being intentional around making this a part of the norm. And then we have others where, they may not just have that development from a soft skill perspective. And so it's not happening. We've never really done that holistically. So what we're looking at from a trend perspective is trying to tie in automation to help us with that. And so we're trying to figure out a way that we can tie in our engagement platform, that we can have that kind of speak a little bit. And so it's not just something that we're doing from a survey perspective, but how can we actually have collaboration tied to engagement, and what does that look like? So we are actually in our tech phase right now of trying to figure out how do we do that. So we're migrating to Teams. We're forcing everyone to kind of stick with one collaboration tool that all of us can use. And we're training each other on how to be more effective at doing that. And then I think once we have that down packed from a communication perspective, then the goal is how do we tie that into some engagement software where we can actually start engaging. So I think for us, it's really all about centralization, because we are decentralized, and that really does not help us. And so we're really trying to focus on how can we find one centralized way that we can communicate with all employees, all levels, and then that helps us engage. Because right now we're doing some things, we're using automation and technology. Some things are through email, some things we're texting. So we have no centralization. And so we're really trying to figure out, what does that look like for an organization as ours, where we do have all generations and everyone wants to obviously engage in a different way. So we're trying to figure out what is the right mix for us. And then obviously once we've identified that, then I think the goal is going to be just as what Lisa said before. How can we train our leaders to understand that this is everyone's job? Because I think current state, it's HR's job. And obviously we don't have the bandwidth. We would love to be able to do it for everyone, but we don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so the goal is to at least have the tools, and then to be able to train all of our leaders, because we want everyone to know that the culture and the experience is everyone's job and not just HR. So that's kind of where it's starting for us. It's just figuring out how can technology help us be more successful at that.
Great. Lisa?
I'm just smiling, Sharell, because I know that vibe. Like, well, just HR should solve that. HR should solve that. It's like no. It's everybody's responsibility. I think that's a really smart way to approach it. Inclusion starts with an inclusive workforce. So that's number one. You can't be inclusive if you don't have an inclusive workforce and a diverse workforce. Secondly, I have a question I'm curious about that of my fellow panelists, but when I was at Uber, that was when ERG groups were starting to be a big trend, and they had an employee, there was an employee resource group for everybody. And an actual funny story, I was over 40 when I started at Uber. And I found out that I got an invitation to something called Uber Sages. And I realized that there was an employee resource group for those over 40. And I said, wait a minute, do we need an employee resource group? That means that I'm an outlier at this company, which I probably was. So it made me feel older than I thought I was, and I think, at the time, some of the ERGs were very active in trying to engage company leadership on issues. I don't know how active they still are, but it was a place in a larger company. At that time, Uber was a global company already, and it was hard to, it was a way to make it a little bit smaller for people, and I think it did help with that. And made people feel included, and that they had other people like them, like me, with people over 40. But I think, and I don't know, Keith and Sharell, if you have much experience with those, but I thought I think they were helpful. I don't know if they are currently still the trend of a way to, and how people view them as the right way. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that was a big piece of what larger, at least tech companies were doing.
Very familiar with them. And we have, Lisa, so it's so funny that you said that. We are bringing that back. So I think it seems to be the new thing. I think for a lot of organizations, and we were at that same place, it's having kind of the strategy and the outcome of the group. So it became for us more of a check the box. And as you know, that's not what it is supposed to be. It is literally supposed to be a resource, but it literally became more of a social group. And then for some, they didn't feel included. So it really defeated the purpose of what an employee resource group was supposed to be. And so we intentionally kind of said, okay, let's revamp. But this time we want to revamp with our executive leadership so that we can have that buy-in from the top. But then we need to have strategy and kind of what do we want out of these groups? And so is it community? Is it resources? What does that look like? And so now we've revamped and we've been intentional about slowly introducing, to your point, bit by bit. So we literally only have 2 that are live, but that's intentional because our goal is to really hone in and then try to see if we can get some data from these 2 with what worked, what didn't work. So as we roll out more, it actually makes sense and we actually have a system. But yes, employee resource groups are still a great thing, but I do think that there needs to be some strategy behind it. So it's just not another thing that
I would agree that people feel like they have to do, or they want to. I mean, that I agree. There does need to be a strategy, because otherwise, it needs to be driving towards something. I think that's smart.
Keith?
Yeah. The slide that you just walked through, first of all, that was, I just learned a lot, Sharell and Lisa, thank you for sharing. The first kind of clause in the slide you had was trust and transparency, and I just spend a second there. We have values in our company that are not just things on a website. Like, we hold each other accountable. I'm the founder CEO, and I get held accountable regularly against our values. Like some of the things that I would say, like trust and transparency, like it has to be earned. Like just because I'm, maybe the boss, like at our company, it's something that has to be earned. And I have this, this phrase that I use inside the company all the time, like things that matter are hard. And like doing the right thing has to be, you have to build muscle memory, because some people, like if they fail, they want to hide it, or they're scared that there's going to be a repercussion. It's like, I say all the time, like, it's okay to fail. And the way I build trust around that is I share my failures. Like, I mean, a lot of decisions I make turn out to be wrong, or things that I wish I could have over, like, but I highlight them, not because I'm proud of them. I'm like, look, remember when I tell you, team member, like it's okay to fail? I'm going to give you an example of how I failed this week. Right. And like, another way, like on the transparency side, we're a technology company, heavy engineering, heavy product. And then like on the business side, there hasn't always been the same reciprocity of transparency. It's like, hey, engineering, tell us about these goals. Tell us about what, the progress against those goals. And I held everyone to this really high standard. And then someone on my executive leadership team came to me and said, like, I think it's fair that you hold us to this standard, but we think it would be fair for you to share transparently about things on the business side. That was 18 months ago. That has changed the culture for the better inside the company. Every Friday in the all hands meeting at the company, like I share things that we're doing well, things that didn't work out the way we expected them to. And what I've learned, like it's just earned trust. People know when I say something, like they can count on it because they've heard me say the things that aren't great. And they hear me say the things that are. So like perspective is like, I have that founder problem, which is like, I'm really optimistic and I'm really passionate about what I'm doing. So like, it's hard sometimes to distinguish like, is that really a big deal or is Keith just making it a big deal? Because I've got this like, I've developed the muscle memory on sharing the things that don't go well. It gives a lot more credibility to the things that do. And that transparency like was a forcing function of a value inside our company. I wasn't doing things, I just want to share, like I wasn't doing things to hide them from people. I just was like, oh, I was thinking this is what the organization needs to hear. And only when someone brought it to me, I was reminded that it would benefit everyone greatly if I would share more. So I started doing it, and it's been a game changer. By the way, not my idea, but something that I adopted quickly because people told me it mattered to them. So
great.
And I'll piggyback on that, Keith, and say that we've done the same thing. I think for the first time since I've been in this organization, our finance department, so we have new players in that space, but they actually took the time to break down the budget, the finances. And to your point, I felt like a student, like it made sense. I could see the alignment, I understood. And I think just as you said before, we definitely built that level of trust because now our employees are like, okay, you're asking me to do this, but then how can I see this with my leaders? But we are doing, so we've been intentional about having what we're calling the report outs. And so even though we're having kind of our HR working groups and things are happening in finance, we are trying to figure out ways, how do we share out what we're discussing, the innovations, the things that went well, that didn't go so well. And as you mentioned before, we are proud to fail forward is what we say. And so we have no reservations with doing that, sharing what we've learned from that. And then hopefully we won't make those mistakes again. But we're confident that in saying that, hey, we're humans, so we will make mistakes, but we can learn from them. And we celebrate that together, whether it's a win because we did it right, or it's a fail and we will figure out how to get it right the next time.
I think that's really smart. I want to jump on that too. I think building trust is really important. And I think it's on a micro level as a manager, when you admit that you've made mistakes and that you're human. And it makes it less scary when, somebody you're managing makes a mistake, then you can say, I've made a mistake too. This is what we have to do. We have to change this. And it just makes all of that less scary. I think, the transparency with the business, particularly in the startup world where I've been at Luminary, there is definitely a hunger for, we want to understand where we are. We're all in this together, particularly, are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it? And so we started doing more regular business updates as well, because the employees wanted to know these things. I think, and that helped greatly. There were lines to that. There were certain things that they aren't able, that we couldn't be fully transparent on when it came to investors, when it came to, there were not, I think that being more transparent and letting people see what's happening and where we aren't doing as well as we want to and where we could do better, I think is a really important piece of building that trust. I also think we have to acknowledge that even in a smaller company, there are things that the CEO may know that he cannot or she cannot share with the entire team. That is just a fact of business and work. And so there was a little bit of tension we shared, but we want to know more. What about this? It's like, well, we can't talk about that right now. But as soon as we're able to, I promise we will. And that's all you can say. As soon as we're able to, we promise we will. Because I think there are certain things that, can't always be shared. And so, but I think for the most part, people have been less, I think that there's a tendency to hold back a little bit more. And like you said, Keith, it may be not because you were trying to, just you're head down focused, right? Like we all know what we need to do. We're just head down. It's like, no, take a pause and let's brief folks on where we are, and I think that's really important.
It's great stuff. All right. We are getting multiple questions. I'm going to save these questions to our next little block. We've got 2 more blocks, recognition, then engagement. So back to you, Eric. Okay, so one slide on recognition. Our business, we have about 250 employees, 120 countries, 4 million users. So we are an engagement, recognition, rewards platform. And what are we seeing globally? This is 1,200 different companies, all different sizes. We're seeing more frequent and more personal recognition. So building on what we've been talking about here, we're seeing different ways to recognize. So service marks, so automated service marks, not just sales, but maybe 30 days. You know, the first 30 days you're getting mark, or attendance, or on the front line, safety. We're seeing birthdays and anniversaries automated. These groups and committees that we talked about, we're seeing more of those, but not just employee resource groups. We're actually seeing self-promoted groups, photography clubs, University of North Carolina football clubs, you know, getting these types of ways to recognize employees and engage employees organically. Then we're seeing the learning and achievement ways to recognize folks, more certificates, more opportunities, and leaderboards beyond just the sales and the revenue. So let's pause there and we'll go back away from the slides here. And this time, I think we're starting off with Lisa, if you want to kick us off. Any specific examples you do personally, you've seen in your companies? Just what are things that recognition that our audience can take away?
So I think that, not everybody's a birthday person, but I think recognizing birthdays is actually important. It's important to the human being. And I think it's good to celebrate. In the old school, before technology, it's like a small group would go out to lunch, like that's what people did on birthdays. But I think work anniversaries, even more so for the company, is an important thing to recognize, because that's a thing personal to me. I joined this company. Wow, it's been a year since I've done it. It's a moment to reflect, to look back, what you've done to get there, what you think the next year might look like for you and the company. So I actually think those things are important markers, even more so for a business to recognize the anniversaries. I think I told you I'm a big believer in verbal recognition for a job well done, whether it's in a small group, whether it's to the person individually, or whether it's in an all hands larger staff meeting, and recognizing people for doing good work. I just think it's super important, and people managers need to know that is part of the job. So I think those things are important. I never thought about the ERGs around interests outside the office, like sports or music or whatever. But I think that's super cool. I mean, that helps make your world smaller. It helps connect you to the office. There's and to the company or the entity. There's no, when you find out that somebody that you work with likes the same band that you like or whatever, that's an awesome moment. You can share that. I just went to see, I'm going to date myself again. I went to see Depeche Mode at the United Center with a gal that I worked with in politics in the year 2000. You know what I mean? We first met, but she and I, we have the same, she's like, and that keeps it, that keeps it cohesive. And so I think that's a really cool idea that I hadn't heard of, but I think that's for companies and organizations to let those things happen organically and to encourage them to do it. Why not? So that's my thought.
All right, Keith.
Yeah, no, those are good. We've, the old me, the Wall Street me, I was like, birthdays, I don't even, why are we talking? But I've really understood as a entrepreneur, people really do, like Lisa said, this is just being a human, and I'm convinced that when I was on Wall Street, I was actually not necessarily a human with my behavior, but I like the idea of recognition. One thing that we do, I would say, well in at Ubiety versus even past startups of mine, is that we tie quarterly performance and outcomes to stock grants, equity grants above and beyond. And I have that benefit as a startup. Like that's like a really valuable currency that people appreciate. Like we have a bonus pool. We designed a bonus pool with like really intentional focus on what matters, how you score against it. And people get excited. So like not only do they get the opportunity to perform and get bonuses, both cash and stock, they're part of the quarterly OKR process, the objective and key result process, that develops what needs to go into the work to be successful. So it's not like, oh, wow, like they give me this bonus option, but like they've given me these unreachable goals. So like I'm never going to get it. People get the bonuses. Now, we ask them in a startup to be really ambitious. They have stretch goals and like there's ways that they can generate like some really significant and meaningful equity awards for themselves. And that's been, what do they always say? Like when someone says, oh, it's not about the money, like it is about the money. Like people do want to be appreciated. And like, we don't just say, here's what you get. Like we sit down and say like, these are the 5 things that you did that were exceptional this quarter. And like, do more of that, right? Like, and those things aren't, you showed up on time. Like this is like, you crushed these goals and this is what we believe it took to get there. And we want to really compensate you well for that. Like, and we tie it directly to actions that they've taken. It's not this nebulous pat someone on the shoulder and be like, keep it up. It's like, no, like we know exactly what you did. And by the way, if you didn't do that, you don't get that bonus. And like people understand the relationships. Like earlier it was said, like, how do you create that culture? Like, it is sort of self-selecting. People that don't want to like sort of take actions in that way of like growing the company, they usually don't want to stay because like they're like, hey, like I was just looking for a job and this isn't for me. Like, so like it's sort of like self-selecting or natural selection where people that really thrive, and this is like to go back to the inclusion point, like this is men, women, this is engineers, non-engineers, people of all sorts of backgrounds. We have people from many different countries, like, and collectively it's a unit. People that, really want to grow themselves professionally, unlock their own value, and get really excited about being appreciated for that value. And then I'll just say like quickly, like weekly in our ELT meeting, we do weekly check-ins that ask things. Were you recognized for your hard work? Do you clearly understand what you're being asked to do? Did you get to use your highest and best talents this week? And those things fluctuate and we manage against it. Oh, hey, person A, who's usually 5s across the board, is like 3s this week, which is like catastrophic. What have we done? And then we just go to them and say like, oh, what could we have done differently here? Or is it something? And they usually say like, oh, I didn't like this. I didn't appreciate this. And this is something I could have used more support on. And it's like, oh, you recognize that I had an issue, so you helped. So it's as much like holding ourselves accountable, but alignment is not that hard to create when you're all working towards the same goal.
Sure.
And I will sum it up and say, I think we're doing a culmination of the two. So Keith, unfortunately for us, we are not able to kind of do that. So we have had to be creative. So we do have some short-term incentive plans that are more specific to our senior leaders. But when we're thinking of the majority of our folks, which would really be frontline, we would not be able to sustain that financially. And so we are doing a little bit of, so what we're calling kind of the 360 recognition, which is just trying to have recognition from all directions. So moving away from it just being peer-to-peer, just being a manager to their direct report, that we are getting everyone in the organization involved. So we use Cool Leaf, which we have reworded to Y Inspire. And so that is the tool that we use. And so again, it is really to help to foster. There is the leaderboard. We do have challenges for the folks that are competitive. And I think it allows us to kind of touch in and be personal with everyone, because I think, as I've heard from both Keith and Lisa, everyone has a different flavor. So like, I'm the birthday girl. So everyone in HR already knows it. As long as I know it's a birthday, I am going to make it a big deal, because in my mind, it is the day that you graced us here on earth. So it is a big deal to me. But I do respect the fact that for others, it doesn't matter. So I think of, service recognition. We recognize that. Now, for someone like me, where, hey, this is the longest job, quote unquote, that I've had, because I'm a consultant, I'm a coach, I need to bounce around. So service recognition doesn't really matter that much to me. It'll probably make me depressed, because I feel like I've only been here for 3 years and everyone else has 30, but there are others who enjoy kind of just being recognized for that tenure. And I think so what we've been trying to do is think about inclusion and not just have one bucket. So we do recognize for birthdays, we do recognize if someone makes a milestone for a project. So thinking, Keith, back to what you said, if we're working on a cross-functional team and we're working on some initiative that ties back to the strategic goal, we are recognizing those folks for those milestones. So when they're going in and making that update, we're making it a big deal in our platforms. And so we're trying to figure out, but one of the cool things that we do is we provide our managers with a tool that they can use with their direct report, so that that person can tell you how they like to be recognized and what they like. So we're not guessing. And so as you come into the door, you already know when you're going through your onboarding with your new hire, you're already prepared for that. So it kind of ramps up that time. So I know that this particular person may love gift cards or they love things of that sort. I know that I may have another direct report that prefers for it not to be a big deal, and she would much rather me give a handwritten note, because we still do that. We still have Y cards and we write notes on them just to say job well done. And in our spaces where we still have people in person, we do have our gratitude walls. And so if you walk around any of our buildings, employees write messages of gratitude to other employees for a plethora of things. And that is always for me refreshing. When I walk into the building, I can always go to that gratitude wall and I'm like, look at all the things that we are grateful for that our peers get. And it's not manager to direct report. It could be like some of the shout outs that I've gotten, I don't even know those employees personally. So it's someone that I may have touched in an email, and then they happen to be by the corporate office and they're like, I want to write on the wall. And so it's great because people are actually going there looking for, kind of what's happening with everyone, but it's celebratory and it feels good and it helps the culture and it's become a part of the culture. So we're now trying to figure out how can we have these walls virtually. So we're trying to figure that out, where we can recognize and give gratitude in a virtual space, but that everyone gets to experience. So for us, it's really been all about kind of just that personalization. So not having the option for everyone, but then really trying to figure out what does each individual employee want, and then how can we kind of capitalize on that. And it looks a little bit different for everyone, but I think it all goes back to everyone just wants a thank you, a job well done. And so whether that's a big thing, or it's literally just a note that says job well done, I think it still matters. I still have Post-its that I've received from people just saying, hey, job well done. And I will save those Post-its, because sometimes I just need to look at that to be reminded that this is why we do what it is that we do. So that's really been working for us. It's just the personalization part of it.
All right. Lots of good tips there. Taking some notes as we go here. All right, we're going to finish up. We've got about 7 minutes, so we're going to go to our last slide and topic here, which is on engagement. The old lasso, hey, thanks, I appreciate you. Ways to engage employee, and there's a nuance here. So we've covered most of this. So what I'm going to do is just talk through this slide. Then I'm going to get everyone a 2-minute wrap, all right? 2-minute wrap on what we've talked about today. For all of you that are attending, you will have an opportunity. We're going to do a summary of the bullets. We also have available this presentation and also a recording, and encourage you all to follow any of our 3 great panelists today. So with that, what are we seeing in terms of ways to engage? Not just recognize, but engage. And what we're seeing is like you touched on, more options. Easy opt-ins, right? And I think if we go one more slide there, yes. Go back one slide, sorry. Nuance on the recognition and engagement. more committees. We're seeing career development and training as part of ways to engage. Events, good old fun events, not just the happy hours, right? But what else can we get together on individually, teams, locations, contests, social activities, and groups? So if we go to that last slide, Eric, this is the growing predictors. It's that trust, belief in a company, the inclusion, opportunity for growth, purposeful work, recognition, flexibility. That's the new predictors of how we're going to enjoy this. And our last slide, win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace. So we're going to pause, finish with the slides, and we'll give you each about a minute and a half, your final parting thoughts. We're going to start Sharell, we'll go to Lisa, then Keith.
I can't believe it's almost over. This has been so fun. I think for me, when I think of just kind of wrapping up, the main thing that sticks out is really just getting your employees involved. So I think a lot of times we think that it's an HR job, it's a manager's job, and a lot of times we're solving for the employee without involving the employee. And I know that that's typically the norm, but for me, it's just ludicrous that we think that way. And I always say, why not ask? Instead of assuming what works and what doesn't work, and instead of assuming, well, how do employees want to be recognized? What do we need to be engaged? Let's just ask. And so I always recommend some form of survey, whether that's if you're going to do a focus group, if you can, if there's a way to do a survey. Let's not assume, because a lot of times I think organizations start from a place where they're blind. They don't know what their employees want. They are assuming, and a lot of times when we put those programs in place, they backfire because we really didn't hear from the employees what they want. So I would say, as it relates to recognition and engagement, just ask them, because the one thing I will tell you, it doesn't matter where you are, employees will tell you. If you ask, they will tell you. Now, it does get to a point where they may stop talking if you don't act on any of the feedback that you receive. But the goal is to listen, be open, and then just make the changes, because a lot of times we're overcomplicating it, because like you said, it could be that we're thinking everyone wants money and everyone wants a promotion, and that is not true. Some people are motivated by monetary things, but for others, it could be something that's not monetary. It could be just as simple as just being able to say, hey, I see you. And so instead of just thinking, I would just advise that we start with our employees, and obviously once we hear from them, do a great job at trying to implement what we've heard. And I think if we do that, our employees will be engaged.
Wonderful. Okay, Lisa, Keith, we got 3 minutes.
I think
You're on.
Everything Sharell said. But truthfully, I think getting feedback, sometimes it is, we do overcomplicate things. Let's hear what they say. One point on trust, and we didn't touch on this a little bit, but when companies, the expectations of employees, when we go out and make grand statements about what we are, what we aren't, what, who, our values, et cetera, employees hold you to those things. So from a public affairs standpoint, but also from an internal managing workforce standpoint, be thoughtful about who you say you are. Be thoughtful about what you say you're going to do. And if you ask people their opinions, be clear that you may not be able to do all of those things. It's just about being forthright and honest with people about what we're all there to do, and what we, that we may not be able to achieve all of it, but that we're going to try to get everybody in the right place. My last 2 things is train people to be people managers and understand human beings, and ensure that the people that you're bringing in, that you're hiring, are the right fit that you're the right fit for them, and they're the right fit for you. And then all these other tools that we're talking about that can help keep employees engaged, it will be a lot easier. If they're not the right fit for your organization, no tool will work.
Terrific. Keith, you can wrap us up.
Yeah, I'll wrap up by ending how I started. Sharell and Lisa, awesome. Like I learned a lot from you both today. I'll just keep it really simple. I would like everything you do be based in values. Try things, trust your instinct, and communicate regularly, right? Like if you have instincts about something, you're probably right. Like when you observe things that feel funny, like, it's like time to like address them. And oftentimes like, my own shortcomings prevented me from addressing things that were obvious. And so like, once I got over my own, like whatever, ego or pride and just set all that aside and put other people first, like usually it works out pretty good when you just, like I said, communicate and just be based in values. So.
Wonderful. That's a wrap. Lot of great content here. We could not possibly get to all the questions. So apologies, but you do have a opening, and that is we will follow up with you with some specifics from this. We will also give you an opportunity to meet with one of our leaders, or please follow any of the three. So once again, a big thanks to all of our panelists today for a really good, thought-provoking, content-rich panel today. Thanks all.